Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Space. Today, I am very excited to announce an interview that took place earlier this week with Colonel Alvin Drew. He is a United States Air Force Academy graduate, pilot turned astronaut. I wanted to have a conversation with him regarding diversity in space, military, NASA, all the above. I'm lucky enough that he agreed to do this interview, and without further ado, I'll show it to you. That rhymed. All right, thank you so much, Colonel Drew, for joining us today with everything that's going on. I thought it would be really great to have a conversation about diversity at NASA, and we're super lucky that you have agreed to do this.
Well, thanks for thinking of me.
I'm very honored. So first of all, I know your amazing career, but for those of you who are just joining, why don't you go ahead and give us a brief synopsis of your career?
Okay, so I grew up right here in Washington, D.C., and got bit by the flying bug. So when I got ready for college, I put in to go to the Air Force Academy. And 4 years later, I came out of there. And I had a great time learning physics and astronautical engineering. I don't know why I double majored. I was a glutton for punishment. But somewhere in there, one of my instructors had kind of put out a flagstone path to becoming an astronaut. He says, get a technical degree like physics or engineering. Go be a halfway decent pilot and you get in test pilot school. And at that point, all of our Air Force astronauts had been test pilots. So I said, well, I'll be simple. I'll get that astro degree. I'll go be a pilot, and then I'll become a test pilot and then an astronaut. How hard could it be?
How hard could it be? It sounds super easy. No, not at all.
So I took an immediate left turn and started flying helicopters, went off to helicopter training, trained with the Army down at Fort Rucker. Which was just a blast, and certainly not the straight line path to the astronaut corps, but I don't regret a minute of it. Through combat rescue, which was extremely gratifying, and then went over to special operations. So I spent all that first third of my career as a combat helicopter pilot. Shortly after that, they were doing a levy from helicopter pilots to go be test pilots for the B-22, but you had to go back through the fixed wing program. So I went to the Air Force undergraduate pilot training, learned to fly jets, and then from there straight to the Navy test pilot school, learned to fly there, and then out to Edwards Air Force Base and spent 4 years out there test flying aircraft. Also got my first unit command out there, which is extremely gratifying, and then I worked on staff at Air Combat Command Headquarters in Langley, Virginia. About that time, there was another astronaut levy coming up, and I figured I had a big enough resume that they might not just laugh and ball my resume up. Lo and behold, they accepted me into the Corps right around the year 2000. So I spent the final third of my career down at Houston as a Air Force astronaut, retiring then as a NASA astronaut before I left there in 2012. And right now I'm working at NASA headquarters as a Department of Defense liaison on helping out with science and technology between the two organizations where we have a common interest, like rockets.
That's awesome. So there was actually an instructor at the Air Force Academy that suggested that you go towards astronaut training?
Yeah, I didn't much care for physics when I was finishing high school, and so I wasn't bad at it. I just didn't enjoy it. So I didn't want to go through all those physics courses. There were a lot of them. There were 4 of them. So I went and offered a challenge. Said, "Hey, how about you let me take the final exams in your physics courses and that you just gave out to the previous classes, and anyone I pass, you give me that grade, and I don't take the class." And they looked at me like, "Who are you?" I'm 17 years old. I'm about 110 pounds soaking wet. And I'm challenging this as one of the tougher physics curriculums in the nation. So I sit down and I pass all 4 of their core physics tests. And then I get summoned in front of the dean of the physics department. And I'm thinking that they're going to accuse me of cheating. Who am I? And so I'm kind of go over there waiting to defend my honor. And they go, "You ever thought about being a physics major?" I just took these 4 tests so I could get out of taking physics courses. Why would I sign up for more? And they said, "Well, here's why you want to be a physics major." And that was that flagstone path to becoming an astronaut. And I was 17 and gullible, so I signed up for 4 years of physics, which actually was the right thing to do. I had a great time learning physics with that staff.
Wow, what a story.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Kind of talking about inspiration, it says on your Wikipedia page that at age 4, you knew you wanted to be a pilot. And then when you saw Apollo 7 take off, you wanted to be an astronaut. So did it discourage you at all that there was no minority representation in terms of astronauts in the Apollo program?
So here's the strange thing. I remember watching the Apollo 11 mission and going, well, that looks like fun. And I asked my dad, okay, what should I do for a living? Where am I going to make enough money to go get to do that? And he's explaining to me, if you're an astronaut, they pay you to go to the moon. And so I go, wow. And so this was about maybe 4 years after the Civil Rights Act of '64. So I've not ever seen discrimination, but there was a living memory of it still there. And so I asked him, I says, well, can a black person be an astronaut? And he says, well, the Air Force has already selected a black astronaut. The gentleman, Major Robert Lawrence, had unfortunately been killed in a plane crash while training, practicing and developing space shuttle approaches. But for me, it was all I needed to know was that the door was open. And there was this, okay, what do I need to do to get there? And that was it. So I said, that was the absence of discrimination that actually kept me on the path.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. And, I know that my dad also went to the Air Force Academy with you, and hearing your story earlier about kind of the guidance that they gave you, did you feel like there was diversity there, or a environment that was comfortable for you?
It was a two-edged sword. As the Air Force Academy to this day has a certain number of has diversity quotas of people they want to bring in, just to make sure there's a good mix of people coming in. And so what I ran into immediately when I was there was, not everybody, but some people were that, are you here because you're among the 1,600 most qualified applicants to get into this class? Or are you here because you're among the very best black applicants to get in, which means somehow you might not have finished in that top 1,600 if you weren't. And so I immediately got an attitude of just showing, not only am I in the 1,600, I'm probably somewhere above you in that 1,600. So go your merry way. And so, so in a sense, it was constructive because I was just ornery enough to go out and try and get things like 4.0 GPAs and score very high in the class. And that was part of the prod, was just proving that, no, I deserve to be here just as much as you do. That was rare. And looking back, it was very few and far between, but it was enough to be a pain.
Yeah, I imagine that would be exhausting to a certain part, but you could always show them your physics tests. Like, bam, there you go. Going back to your military career, were there any hardships in being a minority in the Air Force at all?
Not so much a hardship. It was just this self-consciousness the whole time. There weren't a whole lot of African Americans around me. When the Army was actually more diverse in its flight training than when I got into the Air Force. I shared a squadron with no other black people during my entire career. Every squadron I went into, I was the black pilot, period. And so it makes it hard to blend in. If you're shining, it's wonderful because you're getting all that attention. But if you're not doing your best, or if you're stumbling at some point, boy, it's like you're sitting there up on a stage with spotlights on you. So there's a certain amount of pressure that you can't even screw up even the tiniest bit because it's not going to go unnoticed. And so that was about the height of it. It wasn't that there was anybody gunning for me. It was just that I stood out, and I was just noticed as a matter of human nature. If I was 7 feet tall, you'd notice that too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mentioned when we talked before, Ed Dwight was really, I watched this story from the New York Times, and it was really inspirational. And just kind of the hardships that he went through to the Apollo program was pretty phenomenal. He kind of talked a little bit about exclusion, about when he was in the Apollo program and the exclusion there. Did you feel that being the only African-American pilot at the time, or was it more like, yeah, let's go, I'm going to prove my worth?
It wasn't much prove my worth, but it was, at that point, it was just being a member of the team. It was always a group effort. I was always a member of a crew. I was always in a formation of a flight. And so there was no real individual glory to be gained here. It's just a matter of just getting their confidence, not just your competence, not being competent, but also working and playing well with everybody else around you. And they were determined that they were going to work and play well with me. So there's no reason for me not to. So that was the main thing, was just saying, hey, I'm on top of this, and you can trust me when in a bad day, I got your back.
Right. And I think that's a really great quality of the military, is it's a team effort.
Yeah.
You always have each other's back, where I assume in other professions, it's not so much that group mentality.
Exactly.
So being kind of a trailblazer in your own right, do you think that there's more of an importance for diversity and inclusion in NASA and the Air Force and these different branches of the military?
Yeah, give you a sense of my philosophy about it. It's I'm not a big fan of diversity just for diversity's sake, that we're every color in the rainbow or something like that. It's that if you have a very tough job to do, and warfare is an extremely tough job to do, so is going into space. It's a very dangerous job. That you want the best talent pool that you can possibly get your hands onto. So I tell people, if you just want the cream of that crop of that milk out there, you can have a wide vat, and you don't have to skim very deep to get the cream to get your amount of cream that you want. Or if it's a very narrow flute-shaped one, you've got to dig deep into that barrel to get stuff, and you're going to get less quality. So if you exclude people from your talent pool for reasons that have nothing to do with their merits, you're going to wind up with a less qualified talent pool of people. You want with people who are just unqualified for the job. So if you go look at, what do I need for somebody to go fight a war? Do I need that person to be 7 feet tall? Well, no. Well, then I don't have that height restriction. But I need to be a certain color? No. Then why exclude that? I want everybody I possibly can. And you look at what it took to get to the moon, 500,000 people working on Apollo, and the best and brightest the nation had to offer. There was just no room to be exclusive there, because it was just that important.
Yeah, absolutely. So going kind of to what's happening in today's culture with the Black Lives Matter movement, and I feel like a lot of conversations are being had that were almost dismissed before. There's more room to have conversations about diversity. What changes are you hoping to see with the current movement that's happening now?
So somewhere in all these quantity of conversations, there's a better quality of conversation, and that's where I'm waiting to see if that happens. I'm not necessarily optimistic yet about all this increase in amount of talking. Understand that back in 1968, that was the same year that Martin Luther King was shot. People were very upset. They went out and rioted. They burned down cities. We had conversations, and I thought we'd never see it again. 52 years later, we have rioting again. Back in 1990s, we had rioting in Los Angeles over the same situation where a policeman was excessively violent towards a suspect out there who was Black. So, was it Einstein said it was the height of insanity to keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result? We need to be having a very different conversation than the ones we've had before if we're going to get there. For me, the nut of it is accountability. Whether it's you're talking about Black Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter, those things, a lot of those have that sense of, if it's my community, right or wrong, I think that's the wrong attitude to take. If it's you're wrong, you're just wrong, no matter what color of your skin, whatever color of your uniform. You need to hold those people in your community accountable for their actions. And I think when we can get to that spot, and I don't know how to get there, then we can have the right conversations and iron out the problem. Now, don't get me wrong. It's good to be angry. Your anger is telling you what's important, but there's that other side of your brain that's logic that tells you what things to do about what's important. And that's the part we need to be looking at right now, is that logical side of it. How do we honestly get to the bottom of this problem and solve it?
And not to put you on the spot to solve the world's problems, but what would be that next step in your mind? Like, because I see this, and I completely understand this anger of, this oppression, and, there are cases like George Floyd that continue and have been happening. So once we acknowledge that, which I hope most people do, what is the next step of having that deeper conversation of making those changes?
So I don't know if I have that answer, but I can tell you where I saw one example that I thought worked well. Was I went to South Africa about 8 years ago. And here's a country that had far worse oppression and racism for far longer and more recently than the United States has had. And when apartheid was finally broken up, and of course the Black majority had a Black electorate out there, rather than go out and have things like guilt or reparations, they just simply had what's called truth and reconciliation, where people on either side could get up there and talk about what their experiences were under the apartheid system in a way that was simply accepted. There was no judgment. There were people being put in jail or fined, or there's no sanctions for it. You just got it out of your system. And when it was done, of course, that fits well. And if you're over in that area, that's their culture. That's how they deal with it. I'm not sure that's American culture, but we need something that fits within the American culture that is similar to that, to where we just get this out of our system on all sides, and then we can move on. That's what I think is our best hope for this.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just, if you saw a minority child or if you were talking to yourself at a different time when you were young, what would you say to yourself or other people to have a dream and not let any sort of oppression or bias get in the way, to just persevere and go forwards? What would you say? That,
Okay, so
I don't even
yeah,
know if that made sense.
it makes perfect sense, but understand that one of my old bosses told me a long time ago is if you're not catching flack, you're not bombing any target of significance. So anything worth doing is going to be difficult. It's going to come with challenges, and oppression, racism, things like that do present those challenges. If they're encoded in laws of discrimination, they might not be surmountable. Otherwise, they simply make the path more difficult for you, but there's something to be overcome. So if you have a goal, you have a dream, get after it. My saying that I tell people is that, fortune favors the bold, opportunity favors the prepared. Go out and prepare yourself for what's coming up and what you want to go do. If you want to go do something, you want to go into journalism, be a reporter, go look at what those people are doing are more successful. Do the things they've done, live the way they live, internalize their values. And that's half of it, and that's tough. You know that. You probably worked hard to get where you are right now. But the other half of it is just as tough. As when you got the opportunity, sooner or later comes and knocks on your door. You have to have the courage to step up and take it on. There's never any guarantee of success. Now, I had a comfortable career as a special operations pilot, and there's no guarantee that I was going to get through test pilot training, and failing it would have ended my career. I was doing fine as a test pilot and stepping up as an astronaut. If I went to the astronaut corps and I didn't succeed there, that would have ended my career. None of those were comfortable steps. But I worked hard and had faith that my preparations got me there. So if you're a kid, go do those things. And I find that there's so many people out there. For every one person out there who is going to obstruct you, there's about 9 others out there who are very success oriented and will just goad you, pull you, grab you by the ears, and drag you along that trail of success. Go find those people and spend time with them instead of the ones who would block you.
Yeah, that's great. It's such a, goal oriented mindset of I'm going to go no matter what. So in terms, just to turn the conversation to you in this day and age, is there anything else that, you think that I didn't cover or you want to say, or is there anything that, you feel that would make a difference in what's happening today?
Well, I think you covered a lot of it. We covered a lot of ground there about what needs to be done. And I think that as we, like I said, is go and mine the conversations that we're having out there right now for the right ones. I'm sure there's really good, productive conversations being had. How to sift those out of the rest of the ones that are sometimes not as productive, and with the idea of what's the end goal? Where do we want to be in 5, 10, 15, 25 years with this? And understand that it's going to take some patience. We've had this problem now for almost half a millennium. So this isn't going to go away in a month of violence or 6 months of conversations. I think you've got to turn that ship, and it takes a certain amount of steady-handedness. Think about the fact that the civil rights movement happened right on the heels of the end of World War II. It took 20 years to get a Civil Rights Act, and it just took just steady, calm hands of people like Martin Luther King and the folks behind them, not burning down cities, not doing things like that, but pushing where they need to push hard, where they need to be done, but just getting legislation done, talking to the right people and the right leaders. And it took that type of focused, disciplined, and calm effort to get through that whole thing in order to make it succeed. So that's what I think we need to be thinking about. Well, if it's going to take 20 years to do this, should we be doing all those next 20 years to get that fixed, so that the next generation coming up has no idea what we're talking about when we discuss this with them.
Yeah, that would be quite a day. I look forward to that.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Colonel Drew. I really, really appreciate it. I think that this is such a unique opportunity and such a unique period of time. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your perspective.
I'm glad to have you. Glad to have this conversation with you. It's been wonderful talking with you.
Well, thanks so much. Thanks everyone so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it, and we're very thankful to have Colonel Alvin Drew on today. There were a lot of thought-provoking comments on this interview, so why don't you go ahead and leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And again, I think that this is very important, so make sure you share this around. Thanks everybody.